My name is Naomi Ellis, and 5 minutes ago my mother told me not to come home for Christmas because I would make them look cheap. Her face filled my phone screen, framed by the soft glow of the living room I grew up in. Behind her, I could see the tree perfectly decorated for the photos Paige would post later. My dad sat stiffly at the edge of the couch, one hand on his knee, eyes fixed somewhere just above the camera. Paige lounged in the corner, glitter dress, phone in hand, like this was just another piece of content. Naomi, my mom said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle on her dress. We need to talk about Christmas. It was a Tuesday night in Seattle. Rain had been tapping my apartment windows for hours, the kind of cold, steady rain that makes the city feel hollow. I was wrapped in a faded sweatshirt on my couch, still recovering from a brutal flu, my laptop open beside me on a flight booking page. 10 minutes earlier, I'd been choosing a seat home. What about it? I asked, clearing my throat. My voice sounded rough, like it belonged to someone else. Mom didn't look at me. She stared past the camera, jaw tight. With Paige's situation this year, it's not a good time for you to visit. Paige rolled her eyes dramatically. God, Mom, just say it. I don't have time to sugarcoat this. Evan is coming. He's used to a certain standard. Okay, country club, board seats, the whole thing. He's not. She waved her hand toward the screen toward me. He's not used to being around people who never really went anywhere. Heat crawled up my neck. You mean people like me, I said. Dad shifted, still not meeting my eyes. We just don't want to embarrass ourselves, kiddo. Not this year. The call ended, and I sat there staring at my reflection in the black screen. Rain had turned into a windy hiss against the windows, and the apartment felt heavier than it had an hour earlier. I pushed the blanket off and stood unsteady from the flu, and from something deeper than fever. In the kitchen, I filled a glass of water and leaned on the counter. City lights shimmered through the wet window, blurring into color. The burn in my throat wasn't from being sick. Paige's voice echoed in my head. People who never really went anywhere. She'd said it like brushing off lint. My phone buzzed again, a text from Mom. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. Naomi, don't make this harder. Paige finally has someone decent. Please let her have this. I stared until the letters blurred. A small, painful laugh escaped me. I wondered when Mom had last asked how I was. The truth, she hadn't. Not when I worked late nights. Not when I moved. Not when I spent Thanksgiving alone. Not during 3 flu-ridden weeks in bed. The fridge hummed. A car splashed below. Everything felt too still. I drank deeply, set the glass down, and walked back to the living room. The presents I'd bought my family sat neatly by the door, wrapped a week ago, back when going home felt normal. A watch for Dad, a rare cookbook for Mom, a silk scarf for Paige she'd pretend to love and never wear. I sat beside them, running my thumb over a ribbon. Something shifted inside me. Not anger, yet just quiet disbelief settling into place. The phone buzzed again, lighting the dark. I picked it up, not ready, but unable to ignore it. The notification wasn't another text from my mother. It was an email. For a moment, I felt relieved until I saw the subject line. Onboarding packet, Evan Mercer, CFO. I blinked, thinking the fever was messing with me. But when I opened the message, everything sharpened, instantly. Contracts HR notes, a reminder from Carla asking if I wanted to review Evan's compensation package. I sank back onto the couch. The name wasn't rare, but not common either. Something instinct or dread pushed me to check. I opened our internal directory and typed it in. There he was, Evan Mercer. Early 30s. Ivy League scholarship kid. Former VP of finance at a competitor. A bulldog in negotiations. And now our newly hired CFO. My hire. My signature on his contract. I reread his file slowly. His resume was a quiet punch, years of grinding, no shortcuts, no inherited privilege. A man who hated pretense. The type who walked out the second someone pretended to be more than they were. The type who would have hated everything my family had just performed for him. My stomach tightened as I remembered Paige's smugness. Her casual references to country clubs and board seats. Things she never had and only borrowed from me. I closed the file, letting the truth settle. They hadn't just uninvited me. They'd uninvited me because they thought he, my employee, was too good to be around me. The room felt colder. I could still hear my dad's low, embarrassed voice. We don't want to embarrass ourselves, kiddo. Something inside me steadied. Not healed, not hardened, just sharpened. Because suddenly the hurt cleared, and something clearer took its place. They had no idea who they dismissed tonight, and I wasn't sure I was going to let them keep not knowing. I didn't sleep that night, not from fever, but because everything felt too sharp to rest. The apartment was quiet, except for the heater's hum and wind hitting the windows. I sat at the dining table with my laptop glowing cold light across the room. Carla answered on the second ring. She always did. Naomi. It's late. Are you okay? I hesitated, then said, I need the full ledger on the Ellis household trust. 5 years back. Mortgage, credit cards, transfers, everything. A long pause. I could imagine her frowning. All of it? Yes. Okay, I'll have Ben pull the statements. After hanging up, I checked my email. A new message from Mom waited at the top. Please stop being dramatic. Paige deserves happiness. You showing up will complicate things. Don't make this about you. Those last words burned. I wasn't the one making anything about me. They were the ones who rewrote the story and cast me as the embarrassment, the problem, the outsider. I closed the email without replying. They wouldn't listen anyway. The next morning, Ben called practical as ever. I sent the trust summary. It's extensive. I opened it. Clean, undeniable numbers. The monthly mortgage drafts. Paige's rent, the summer credit card bill I'd paid for Mom. Every dollar traced back to me. Traced. This will hit them hard, Ben said. It's not to hurt them, I replied, though it sounded strange aloud. It's just the truth. We discussed logistics, notice periods, legal boundaries when the trust could be frozen without breaching agreements. After the call, I leaned back and exhaled. For the first time all night, something like clarity flickered. Not hope. Not forgiveness. Direction. And direction was enough to move. By the time my flight confirmation hit my inbox, the sky outside had shifted from gray to the dim blue that comes right before night settles in. I closed my suitcase slowly, more aware than ever of how quiet everything felt. I wasn't packing much, just 2 days' worth of clothes, the kind of simple, tailored pieces Paige always said made me look like an off-duty librarian. I wasn't going home to impress anyone. I was going to end something. When the car arrived to take me to the airport, I slid into the back seat and leaned my head against the window. Seattle blurred past wet sidewalks, fogged-up windows and coffee shops, people hurrying with their collars pulled high. It should have felt comforting. Safe. But tonight, it felt like the space between who I'd been and who I was about to become. Halfway to the airport, my phone lit up again. First a call from Mom, then Dad, then Paige, one after another like they'd coordinated the attack. I watched the screen flash in the dark car but didn't answer. The voicemails came seconds later, voices stacked on top of each other with the same frantic edge. Mom sharp and urgent, telling me not to ruin Paige's Christmas. Dad angry and tired, insisting I stay away. And Paige voice cracking at the edges, threatening to call the police if I showed up and caused a scene. I felt the driver glance at me through the rear-view mirror when that one played. I just shook my head. They don't know me, I said quietly, mostly to myself. By the time the plane touched down in Chicago, the snow was falling in slow, heavy flakes. The air bit at my skin as I stepped onto the jet bridge, and for a moment a strange wave of nostalgia passed through me. This city had held every version of me at one point: shy kid, awkward teenager, ambitious student, and the adult who kept coming home hoping things might change. I took a breath and pulled my coat tighter. Not this time. Outside the rideshare lane was chaos, but I walked past it and straight toward the black sedan waiting with my name on the dash. I wasn't staying at my parents' house. I wasn't walking into that familiar script again. This time they would meet me on neutral ground or not at all. The hotel room was warmer than I expected, all soft lighting and quiet air vents humming above me. I dropped my coat over the armchair and set my suitcase by the window, watching the snow fall in slow spirals toward the streetlights below. Chicago always looked gentler in winter, the way the city softened under white. Tonight it felt like a place holding its breath. I kicked off my boots and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence settle. For the first time since the call, the weight of everything pressed down hard enough to make my shoulders curl forward. I had crossed the country to stand my ground, but sitting there alone in a hotel room on Christmas Eve, I felt that old familiar ache, the kind that made me wonder why I kept trying with people who refused to see me beyond what I could give them. My laptop chimed, just as I lay back against the pillows. I reached for it, expecting another legal document or a calendar reminder, but it was an email from Evan. "Merry Christmas, Ms. Ellis. I'm settling in well and looking forward to our work together next year. Thank you for the opportunity." I stared at the message, feeling a strange twist in my chest. He was probably sitting in my parents' living room right now, drinking my dad's overpriced whiskey, eating the roast my mom made only for guests she wanted to impress. He was in the middle of the performance they'd built, believing he'd walked into some polished upper-tier family, and Paige had told him I was unstable, difficult, jealous. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed a short reply. Formal, professional, emotionless. "Merry Christmas, Evan. Enjoy the holiday. We'll talk in January." When I hit send, the room felt colder. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. The truth sat heavy inside me, but something else began to surface, something steadier than anger. I wasn't going to show up tomorrow to start a fight. I wasn't going to argue with anyone or claw back a place that they had taken from me. I was going to show up so the truth could stand in the room with them, and whatever happened after that, I would finally stop carrying the weight alone. Christmas morning came in a blur of pale light through the hotel curtains. I stood before the mirror, smoothing the dark green dress I'd packed, simple, soft, quiet. Paige would call it boring, but it looked like me, or at least the version of me I was willing to bring home. At 11:15, a black sedan arrived. The driver opened the door, and I slid in, holding the small gift bag with the trust ledger inside. It felt heavier than paper should. As we neared my parents' neighborhood, everything looked familiar. The brick houses, tidy hedges, sagging inflatable snowmen. Turning onto their street brought a sharp pinch in my chest, not fear or nostalgia, but the echo of memories that no longer fit. Their house was decorated as always, lights on the porch, wreath on the door, a too cheerful ceramic Santa. Another sleek car sat in the driveway. Evans. He was already inside. The driver asked if he should wait. I told him yes. I walked up the frosted steps. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Mom stood there, eyes wide with panic. "Naomi, what are you doing here? I told you." "I'm dropping off gifts," I said evenly. "I won't stay long." Paige's voice chimed from inside sharp. "Is that the caterer Evans starving?" She appeared behind Mom's sequins glittering, her face drained when she saw me. "Are you kidding?" she snapped. "You actually showed up." Dad stepped into the doorway, jaw tight. "Naomi, don't do this. You're embarrassing us." A familiar ache rose, but I held still. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said quietly. "Just to give you what belongs to you." From the living room, a man's voice stopped mid-sentence, and when Evan turned toward the doorway, the entire house seemed to freeze. Evan stood beside the Christmas tree, champagne in hand, the gold lights catching on his watch. At first he didn't recognize me. His polite smile stayed fixed, ready for small talk. But then his eyes narrowed, focused, and everything shifted. His smile vanished. The glass stopped midair. "Ms. Ellis," he breathed. Mom turned toward him, confused. Paige let out a thin, nervous laugh. "Evan, no. That's just Naomi, my sister. She works somewhere. She's not..." But Evan wasn't listening. He set his glass down carefully, as if any sudden movement might break the moment. When he looked at me again, the shock was unmistakable, followed by recognition, then something colder. "Naomi Ellis," he said louder. "You're the Naomi Ellis." He didn't mean the awkward daughter standing in the foyer. He meant the co-founder whose signature was on his contract. The voice he'd heard in encrypted calls. The woman who'd interviewed him behind a blurred screen. Paige stared between us, confusion sliding into panic. "What are you talking about?" He swallowed. "Your sister is my boss." Silence crashed over the room. Dad dropped his hand from the door. Mom opened her mouth but couldn't speak. Paige shook her head like she could undo reality. "No," she snapped. "She's lying. Naomi, tell him you're lying." "You don't, you're not." I stepped farther inside, holding out the gift bag. "I've never lied to you, Paige. You just never cared to ask who I am." Evan took a step back, not from me, but from the illusion he'd walked into. He looked at Paige, then her parents, seeing them clearly for the first time. "You told me she couldn't hold a job," he said softly. "You told me she was jealous, unstable. You told me..." Paige's breath cracked. "Evan, stop, please." But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was watching the truth fall apart in front of him. Evan stepped away from Paige, her words suddenly too heavy to hold. He pressed a hand to his forehead, exhaling as everything rearranged itself in his mind. When he looked at me again, his voice was steady, professional, painfully respectful. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Ellis. I thought I understood this family. I didn't." Paige grabbed for him, mascara streaking. "She's twisting everything. She always does this for attention." He moved out of her reach, calm and sharp. "No, Paige, she didn't twist anything. You lied to me about her, about all of it." Dad rubbed his temples. Mom clutched a chair. "Naomi," she whispered, "why wouldn't you tell us you were successful?" "Because you never asked," almost slipped out, but instead I set the gift bag on the table, the ledger inside landing with a soft thud. "That's every dollar I've covered for this family in 5 years, I said. "Mortgage, credit cards, Paige's rent. I'm ending the trust. You'll be stable but not dependent on me." Paige sank onto the stairs, shaking. "You're ruining everything. Evan's gone. Are you happy?" I looked at them, feeling oddly hollow. "No, but I'm done being the invisible backbone of a family that only values me when I'm useful." Evan stepped toward the door. "I'll send a formal update Monday, but I'm not staying here." He gave a tight, apologetic nod and walked out. Silence filled the house. I pulled on my coat. "Merry Christmas," I said, not out of warmth but finality. Outside, the icy air felt cleaner than anything inside. As I stepped into the waiting car, Snow drifting over the windshield, a quiet certainty settled in my chest. I hadn't lost a family today. I'd just stopped pretending I still had one.